Hi everyone, it's Michelle Lightworker here and welcome to our fourth instalment of Enlightenment Activation series. This episode we're actually focusing on the topic of unforgiveness and how unforgiveness can help us activate our enlightenment. We've all experienced unforgiveness for ourselves or towards other people in our lives. We've also experienced being on the receiving end of someone else's unforgiveness towards us. I spoke to 6 individuals about their experience with unforgiveness and how it activated their enlightenment.
Hi, my name's Carolyn and I am 42 years old. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm a kinesiologist and author of Empowered Happiness, and I'm passionate about helping people find happiness. Many years ago, I was thinking about how I was processing forgiveness, and forgiveness was a big part of something I struggled to do for others and to myself. Just before my total rock bottom, there was a wedding in the family and I wasn't included in the wedding. Everything that happened, I felt a victim. I felt like everybody was leaving me out. I felt like I wasn't invited to the movies or I wasn't included in the wedding. I had people telling me that I was mentally unstable, and everything that was said to me and everything that was I perceived as done to me, I held on to. And I couldn't forgive them. And I would hold on to that drama for months. And I would go from place to place to place. And I would go, oh, did you know so-and-so said this to me? How dare they do this to me? And, do you know I wasn't invited here and I wasn't part of this? And it really spiraled out of control to the point that every little thing was happening to me. And I just couldn't let go of anything. I couldn't forgive those people around me. And it was irrelevant of what was going on in their lives, because at that point in my life, everything was happening to me. And I had no perspective on what other people might be going through. After I've hit that rock bottom, I actually went through a period of really enlightening myself and releasing a lot of the past. And I had a realization only about a month ago. I had an incident with a family member and I was told in no uncertain terms that I was mentally unstable, and the whole family thought the same thing. And it was really interesting because I looked at it and I thought this was the same thing that was said to me 6 years ago. And I held on to that for months. I looked at that statement. Of course, I was upset when it came through because I was a little bit taken back. But what I found was I was actually able to release and let that go within 3 or 4 days. And it was only about a week later that I was blown away by how far I've come in 5 years of working through things. Not only was I able to forgive that comment because I knew it was no longer true, and even if it was, it's irrelevant because what someone else says to me and thinks of me is not something that I'm going to allow to affect me. But I was able to forgive the person and really let it go, because I did actually see that person the week after. We had a lot of family things going on, and it was one of those time periods where I had to see them. And I was able to let it go and really, and I think what the biggest thing for me was realizing how far I've come. The biggest learning is really, really, really learn to forgive the other person as well as yourself, because we can be so hard on ourselves. And even though I overreacted when I initially got that comment, I let it go and thought, you know what? That's okay. I forgive myself for responding that way, and I forgive them for saying it. And since then, I've been able to find peace and move on. And it's no longer part of my aura. It's longer part of my energy. And it's no longer part of my story. I'm no longer the victim, and I've now taken control. So I guess that's what I wanted to say about forgiveness, that it's so powerful. And it was the one thing that was one of the main things that held me back from finding real happiness. And it kept me stuck in depression for so long. So forgiveness, it's powerful.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Gibson. I'm 42. I'm from Newcastle and I'm a spiritual strategist and psychic medium. In 2005, my best friend suicided, but her suicide was a little different from other people's, and she murdered her 3-year-old and her 5-year-old and her husband before killing herself. She was the first recorded woman in history to have used a firearm in a family murder-suicide. because of that, the aftermath for all of us was a little different from normal suicides. There was a lot of media attention, around myself in particular, because we were colleagues. We worked in maximum security prison, and I was the mental health nurse. And here I am, my mental health nurse / psychic, who couldn't foresee what was going to happen in amongst the drama that had led up to that. She and I had been fighting a couple of weeks beforehand. I had started to pick up that she was lying. My empath abilities had really started to be triggered. I didn't know that I was an empath at the time, but the darkness surrounding her and what was going on with her was making me feel sick. And I had noticed that every time I was around her for a few weeks prior to this happening, I felt very physically unwell and would vomit. And the night before, we were at a work event, and I wasn't speaking to her because we'd had a big argument a couple of weeks beforehand, and she was making me feel ill. And she came up to me and she was crying and saying some odd things, and I got very angry at her, and I put my hand up in her face and I told her to F off. And that was the last thing that I said to her. And the next day she did what she did. It took me a long time with this, because social media and what she'd done, people were calling her a murderer, and that was so upsetting to me, because here was this woman who had been my best friend for years, and I loved her children so much. She was such a good mum, and I just couldn't understand how she could do that. And it took me a long time to get past my anger and my hurt, and get past my anger and my own selfish kind of things about what had happened to our lives in that aftermath, being hounded by media, cameras outside our homes, cameras following us around work. So there was a huge interest in me because I was a best friend, and here I am, the mental health nurse, and I didn't see this coming. So a lot of people had a lot to say about that, and I carried so much guilt. And I wish that our last words to each other hadn't been my hand in her face telling her to F off. But I didn't know at the time I was going through Kundalini awakening. The trauma of what happened with her had triggered off my Kundalini, and I didn't know that it was Kundalini because I wasn't spiritually healthy or aware during that time period. I learnt that all of the bitter in my life had blessings. And I turned to my spiritual health, and I realized how important my spiritual health was in my life to get through these dark periods, and that I was living in darkness, and that I needed to face the life through forgiveness and gratitude. And it transformed my entire life. And eventually I learned to forgive her, and I learned to accept the social media comments that she was a murderer, even though it devastated me to accept that my best friend was a murderer who murdered her 2 children and her husband and killed herself. And I came to understand why through forgiveness and through gratitude. It led to this most amazing enlightenment within me. And now I live my purpose. I live professionally as a psychic medium, which, from being a mental health nurse in correctional centres to now working professionally with people on their spiritual journey and opening up awakenings to other people, I've really got to be grateful to that time of my life, and be grateful for her and our soul contracts together, and what would happen to my life as a result of being part of her life and her story and her actions. And I'll forever be grateful.
Hi, I'm Megan Freeland. I am a 46-year-old author from Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. I also write a blog, and I'm a stay-at-home mum. Recently, I had to go to hospital, and I had a flashback. Now, as somebody who experienced sexual abuse as a child, part of my story is that I have had a lot of repressed memories that have come up, and it it triggered a flashback, not to what I usually have, which is the horrible abuse that I experienced. But this was a flashback to a time as an 18-year-old. I was, entirely devastated and depressed, and I tried to overdose. So when I came home from hospital, I was doing some healing processes on myself. And so what I feel has happened from this process is I've been given the opportunity to heal and to forgive myself. I have held inside of me so much grief, so much. I hated myself. I've been embarrassed. I've been humiliated of who I am because of what I did to myself, the abuse that I inflicted upon myself. That's been the hardest thing to forgive. And in this moment that I've just had, I connected to that part of me that was fractured. And I was presented with this opportunity to really just sit with that and say, it's okay, you can come back. I forgive me for doing what I did. Feel a sense of wholeness and a sense of self-worth that I haven't had in a very long time. And I'm able to talk about this without tears flowing down my face. So I forgave the person who abused me because I believe that abuse is a cycle. I believe abuse is a generational cycle that goes on and on and on. And I believe that it's our job here when we wake up and our consciousness wakes up and we go, oh my God, it's the cycle. And I'm stuck in this cycle. And when I understood that, it was kind of fairly easy for me in my story, okay, and I know that this is not that is easy for other people, but in my story, I know that I could forgive him for what he did. He was very young himself. I was 3, he was 12. It went on until he was a growing teenager. I believe he was in a cycle. What I don't find so easy to forgive is the silence that surrounds abuse that is everywhere in society, because it's everywhere, and I hear it all the time. So for me, I have been through, I've had counselling and trauma counselling and all the counselling. For me, it is understanding that we are spiritual beings, that we have control of ourselves as spiritual beings, to live a human life, to awaken, to evolve our souls so that we break these cycles. I did this because I knew I had to, so that it wouldn't happen to my daughter, so that she's free. And don't get me wrong, it's not simple. It is not simple at all, and it's painful, and it hurts, and there's a lot of crying, because I believe that the path of spirituality is about facing the shadow and integrating that into us. And then we move into that place of enlightenment that comes from integrating that light and the dark together, and it merges, and we move forward.
My name is Jessica Acosta. I'm 26 years old from Tampa, Florida, and I work with contracts and compliance in the medical field. I'm going to share my story about an experience where I was sexually abused and ultimately robbed as well. I had a friend, which we were 17, young, irresponsibly drinking, and unfortunately it led us into a situation which guys took advantage of us. It was definitely a traumatic experience where I would never want anyone to ever be in that type of situation where someone's forcing themselves upon you. As a woman, I think it's one of the most horrible feelings ever to not be able to feel so helpless and not be able to resist somebody who's doing that to you. At first, it was definitely hard to understand and take in. I had lots of rage and anger towards that person because I just didn't understand the justification of it. Eventually, though, I definitely found peace within myself to forgive not only the person in the situation, but myself. Because throughout my learning and growth, I realized that I was holding the pain within. And by giving that situation power, it took away from myself. By forgiving everything and really coming to accept it as what it is and seeking that truth within me, I've found a lot of peace. It's not easy. The pain in the wounds are real. I would never deny the fact of what I went through, but at the same time, I've learned that everything happens for a divine reason, and it's definitely made me stronger and much more aware of things now. So I feel that although it is a horrible experience, I'm very glad to be where I am now, and I'm just so proud to be who I am, where I can share this story and just overcome those type of things that I've gone through in my life, no matter what. Regardless of what happens in life, you always have the power of choice, and your only power of choice is now. So we can live in the past and we can dwell on those things in the way that we've seen them before, but my new perspective on life has helped me so much to grow and just evolve as a person and let go of that pain. Now I'm very passionate about sharing the enlightenment experience, the spiritual journey that I'm on, because I feel that it has brought me to so much more joy in my life, which I had never experienced before. And I'm really on a mission, in a sense, to help others come to that awareness, because everyone has the ability to do so. No matter what you've gone through, no matter what you're going through now, you can always seek positivity and in life. You can always find something to appreciate. You can always find some shining light, no matter what, if you just seek it. So that's something that I definitely take pride in now, is sharing my experiences with others and sharing that love and light and positivity with everyone.
I'm Eric. I'm 42. I work as a fire consultant. Now I live in a place called Camden. I spend most of my time in South Sydney, though. When I was about 5 years old, my mother had won the farm back in a child custody and divorce matter between my parents. At that age, we moved back to the farm. And opposite our place, there were two houses. One of them was a girl, and the other house had 4 children, one of which was a girl, the other 4 were boys. Now, one of the boys was 15, and he had abused his younger sister. Now, I don't know whether the cycle goes back further, but his younger sister, he'd encouraged her to sleep with her brother. At that age, the brother was 7 years old and the sister was maybe 5. The brother then abused the girl across the road from me, who was 8 years old at the time. Now, she was an unpopular kid. She was the one that people picked on. Now, she in turn brought me into her room. I was 5 years old at the time. The first occasion, she was angry with me because as a man, you've got to be prepared for this sort of thing. And I wasn't. I didn't know anything about that sort of thing when I was 5. The second occasion, I was compliant. And the third occasion, I was compliant. And after that, never again. Some years later, the girl from across the road had confronted her father about their sexual abuse, who then pointed out that he wasn't around when she was 8 years old. He was working in North Queensland. She let that go. And a few years after that, the boy, who was 7 at the time, died of a stroke, complications brought on by long-term drug abuse. That's when she realised it was him. As soon as she realised, she called me and let me know that she had got to the bottom of her own story and understood where it had come from. And in doing that, she allowed me to understand where it had come from. And in knowing that, I've been able to let go of the entire thing. I don't know whether that means forgiveness. I like to think that it was forgiven much, much earlier. But to move forward and completely forget about it, it's something which I haven't thought about for a lot of years. There's a couple of levels of forgiveness. As one may forgive and forget. One might take that to a further level and completely forget. Not that it's blocked out of one's mind, but it's forgotten, like, I don't know where I bought my milk last week or how many bottles of milk I brought last. It just becomes completely irrelevant because I've been able to close that. In the long term, I have, in my adult life, in my preferences, I prefer a woman who is much older than me, maybe 5 years or more. Otherwise, I haven't noticed any particular effects because I have chosen to forgive, to let go of this. I've chosen not to move this forwards. I've chosen that that stops with me. It doesn't happen again.
Hi, I'm Asha Eidolon from www.appliedurbanshamanism.com. I'm 42 years of age, from Adelaide, South Australia. The concept of unforgiveness and feeling unforgiven and the load that creates and how has moving through a journey of being unforgiven or labelled as the black sheep within the family actually empowered and served as actually a fulcrum for a lever to actually rise and open up the heart and develop as a person. Certainly I'm the black sheep of my family. And that in itself has been a journey which has ultimately, and I'll say this first, led me to love them a lot more. For me, you know, it felt bad for a long time, actually. It felt really bad. And I was overwhelmed with a sense of, even just as a young kid, you know, like, where's my life, you know? And I'm sort of smoking cigarettes and listening to Black Sabbath records in the corner of the schoolyard, and everyone else appeared normal. And it just did, you know, in all honesty, I was set out on a path of very heavy rebellion, and I learned a lot around that. But I have questioned whether all of that was really necessary, because it's all led me back to a place where I know that I'm okay. And crazily enough, as it seems, and if anything, I'm known for radically alternate perspectives. I think that this whole black sheep thing is kind of how we get marked for spiritual growth, actually. Yeah, I think the most amazing thing for me always about this this work, you know, and going through these different parts of self and wondering how the hell it's ever going to line up and make sense is paradox, you know, and so we're looking at the journey of being unforgiven and then strategies to master forgiveness. But the beauty of it is liberation. Actually, for me personally, it has liberated me to a place where I don't need to be forgiven. I do not require the approval of anybody else. I require my own, and that is a daily process of connection. And this is really important, you know, to take, even if it's just 2 seconds, to look in a mirror and touch your heart and connect with yourself. My journey with all of this stuff has absolutely eliminated the need for forgiveness, which I feel is about approval seeking. However, asterisks, If I stuff up or behave like a ratbag or do something terrible, and it still happens from time to time, human, I've got to step up and offer apology where it's due. And I do that for me, and it doesn't always mean that I get one when maybe I should. So part of this too is the end of a sense of entitlement, self-accountability, yeah, and respect for each other. This idea of sort of, for me to be here in the light, you have to be over there in the naughty corner. And I think that is, that's a very old mechanism which needs to be broken down, and we can only do that through some tools and a bit of love and a lot of awareness. Bad emotional habit. And the only thing that can kind of break this stuff is it's a blend of humility and self-study and self-inspection, cleaning up your own backyard, but also a blend of militancy. You know, we kind of got to train ourselves and then train others, and part of that is learning when to say no. Much in the same way you would to a naughty child who you love very much, but in this case, it could be your mother or your father. How to understand forgiveness is to learn how to do forgiveness properly. There's a bit of a saying which I might have stolen and beefed up a bit, that the fool forgives and forgets. And this isn't gender specific. The plain man forgives and never forgets. The sage or student of spirit forgives by remembering who we all really are, which is basically we are the God force playing the game of self-recollection here in this kind of chaotic world. Feet are going to get trampled, feathers ruffled, you know, all this stuff that does create experiences which are actually essential for growth. Will I ever fit in? You know, that remains forever, and I'll take it. I look myself in the mirror and, you know, I touch my heart and I go, I'm okay. I know it. It's been tried and tested. So I think that whatever you're feeling and whatever you're going through, if you persist, you must persist. You will get to a place where actually it will make you a lot stronger.
So what do you think? I know that we've all been there. We've all experienced those really hard situations, whether we're being rejected by a family member, not invited to things, judged for being crazy, whether we've ourselves committed suicide or treated ourselves really physically badly and abused ourselves or other people and had to forgive ourselves so that we could liberate ourselves. We've all experienced someone abusing us in some fashion and had that opportunity to let go and find peace within ourselves. So we really have an opportunity to remember who we really are, to be the sage, to be the student of spirit, and to really identify where we can actually tap into our heart space in a bigger capacity, love deeper, love bigger, find that place in our heart, those little darkened spots where we can expand to our fullest capacity and embrace all of who we are. For without forgiveness, we have a heaviness that infiltrates our hearts, our bodies, and our minds. And it's hard to propel ourselves forward. I always like to say that forgiveness is like a slingshot. As we let go of all the stuff that we haven't forgiven people for, we are slingshot forward into our future. So join us and be in the energy of forgiveness so that we can make this world a better place and change it from the inside out.